Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back for another super exciting podcast episode here at the SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast. Your host, Scott M. Graves, the SMG in the SMG. And I'm feeling, it's a lot of, it's gratifying tonight. This is episode 33, and we're wrapping up tonight, season 1. We are. Incredible, right? Yeah, right?
Right.
Can you believe it already?
No, I can't. Right? 33 weeks flew by.
That's the voice. You can hear the voice of our ever loyal, intrepid, my sidekick, producer Cam McLeod in Londonderry, New Hampshire. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm excited. It's going to be another swell night. I think we're definitely ending on a high note for sure for this year.
Now, as you know, I'm doing all right. I'm doing good, man. It's close to Christmas. I got 2 kids, so it's a happy time of year. All the time's happy time of year, particularly now. How's Dave Grohl doing for episode 33 back there?
Always watching over. He'll always
stuck
be
with
there.
us. Dave Grohl on the poster behind Cam is stuck with us through 33 episodes in season 1. We've survived COVID. We've survived numerous changes to our parent company. And yet we are still here.
We're still here. I think that's the perfect answer for the Are We Here Yet podcast title question. We're still here.
We are in fact here. Man. Well, anyways, I have a little bit of something to read as an intro here for our next guest. He is as appointed by the National Beat Poetry Foundation, which happens to be headquartered in the metropolis of Wolcott, Connecticut, appointed Paul Richmond, our guest, Beat Poet Laureate of Massachusetts from 2017 to 2019, and appointed the National Beat Poet Laureate of the United States of America, 2019 to 2020. So here we are in the last 3 weeks of our guest's tenure as the Beat Poet Laureate of the USA. Paul's work, best described as political and deadpan, delivered wryly, humorously in his own style. He's been called Assassin of Apathy, power of words and humor on the unthinkable, the unsolvable, to analyze, to digest, to give birth to creativity and hope. His work has been published in 4 books, in many, many journals, magazines, anthologies, and poetry collections. He's a Pushcart Prize nominee, and he's performed nationally and internationally. And frankly, there's too many performances to list here. Later on, you can go to Paul's website. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, Mr. Paul Richmond. How are you, Paul?
Hey, great. Thanks for that great introduction, Scott. Really glad to be here. This is good. How are we doing?
Yeah. I'm doing good, man. I'm happy to be Zooming it with you tonight. This is good. This is actually the first time that you and I have actually had a one-on-one conversation like this, I believe.
I guess so. It's funny, in the Valley, we can have a bunch of overlapping circles. And then with Facebook, you can actually say, oh, that person's my friend. Well, actually, we sat down and shared a drink or a dinner or probably played soccer, anything. Well, I see his posts. So that's all good.
Right.
And we have mutual friends. You reading that made me realize I need to update that one particular page. I just started a new website. I have 6 books now. I just put out a new book.
Oh, wow.
The 24-hour store that is closed. I don't know if you guys had it in Buffalo, New York. We had 24-hour stores. They weren't like 7-Elevens. These were like whatever the new minority was in the city ran these stores, and they were because Buffalo, the bars were open till 4 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
These stores were open, so you could go at 4 a.m. and get milk or birth control, whatever you needed, and then go home. You know what I mean? And
you could even get milk and birth control.
Yeah, either one. You didn't have to worry about a snowstorm and go for milk and bread. You could go for the birth control and the milk or something. Right. I'm not sure.
Right.
Actually, that's pretty impressive for Buffalo because for those people listening around different parts of the country that don't know, places like Rochester, New York, Buffalo, they suffer from time to time from what they call lake effect snow.
Yes.
And you got to be dedicated if you're going to be running a 24/7 store. I don't care if it's independent or not in the wintertime in Buffalo, because you might get 70 inches of snow a day or a week.
Being there, people would say to me, how could you live in that city? And I would say, it's a great living room scene.
Yeah.
because
That's
most of the
fair.
year your car was in the street stuck with two cars next to each other, snowed in, and then they couldn't pull the plow. They'd have to wait or pull cars out. So you walk down the street and you went into someone's living room. And so we had these great living room scenes. Once it got warm and you walked outside and went, oh man, I live here. Usually you took off and you went someplace in the woods. But otherwise, it was like, but yeah, you could walk to most stuff. So you'd walk down to the bars and the shops and all that kind of stuff. And but I don't live there anymore. I moved because it was a city going down for a while.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's true too. That could be a whole other podcast, man. I almost about a decade ago, in another business I owned, almost had an opportunity to work on the waterfront there, and we didn't end up getting that contract. But there's been a lot of effort, it's an interesting place.
The city has really totally been redone because they've gone to a medical thing. But I was there during the steel town operations, and when those steel plants left, it really devastated folks.
Yeah.
A funny town in
all those lake cities, right? I mean, they're Rochester, and it's funny, they have so much opportunity right now. A lot of factors would need to change, but there's good bones there, as they say. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially industrially, and the lake is still, that's still a viable entrepot to get stuff back and forth to different places.
Yeah. I mean, it was closed when I was a senior in high school because you got rashes from the water, and at some point it burned. But yeah, I mean, you were hoping that the lake they started to clean it up a little. Hopefully, it was like
right.
They're always tough on artists, though, in terms of. But there was a lot of stuff that got created in Buffalo, maybe because of that pressure. I mean, that's an interesting discussion. Do you need repression to bring out artists, or depression, or working towns or something? But there was a lot of stuff that got created there. I got inspired there a bunch there before I came here, in terms of my writing or just being creative. There was a good scene there in a lot of ways.
And this is good because we're talking a little bit about where you come from and stuff. And I wanted to kind of start there too, because we haven't ever just sat down and had a beer together or coffee or whatever. I've gotten a lot of different stories about how you came to where you are right now. So why don't you share with our listeners a little bit, just like, what your story is and how you evolved as an artist, as a person, the different kinds of jobs you had over the years, and, stuff like that.
Cool. So I'll just say this. I'm a writer. I didn't apply to be a Beat Poet Laureate. I was just doing what I was doing. I had festivals. I was hitting stages. The organization came to my festival, met me. I started to go to them. Suddenly they gave me the award. So somebody, when they hear that, they go, wow, you were a writer for a long time. Well, no, in Buffalo, I basically, I was taught sight reading. It was an experiment where they thought that if they showed you the word, you would remember the word. And then at some point they were going to come back to phonics, but they never did. And so it was the only time my father kind of went nuts on me, because I didn't really understand dictionaries, because it was like, if someone said, well, look up the word what, it was like, I don't know how to spell it, so how am I supposed to look it up? I didn't know that you start looking under the W's, because what, Right. And so my father thought I was being a kind of a, just being an ass. And, then suddenly finally realized I had no idea what he was talking about. So without going too much into that, I didn't read a lot. And, I was in the school system that allowed you to kind of just move along. So I didn't start reading kind of fourth grade books until maybe seventh or eighth grade. And the only reason, so I wasn't, I got more turned on to, when I was in Buffalo, there was an amazing English department when I finally got back there, without getting too much into all that. But it made me think about just expressing myself. So I hit the road a bunch, quote, almost like on the road. But I took journals and I started writing. And that's when I realized I didn't know how to write. I wasn't writing in the lines. I had way too many misspellings. I'd get really frustrated because I'd try to write it, and then I'd get caught up in thinking about how to spell the word, and then I'd lose the thought. And so it was a process of just doing that. And so at some point I did it more and more and more. And then I was teaching for a while. I taught at the University of Buffalo from 71 to 79.
And what were you teaching? You teaching English or something like that?
No, actually, that's kind of a long story. The short version is in 1969, 5 or so professors gave about 4,000 independent studies, and all those students went across the street and opened up storefronts and created women's studies, created environmental colleges, created stuff on Marxism, on anarchism, on fighting the draft, all these things. And battles ensued, and it became so strong, Black Lives Matter, all these things, that they actually brought a bunch of these things onto the campus, and they created what they called 13 colleges. So women's studies, Black studies, all these courses, or these people came to could teach. And one of the things they won, which most people maybe don't realize, is there was the catch-22. You couldn't have Black studies or women's studies because there was nobody who got graduated from any of those. So there was no professor with a master's or a PhD.
Right.
So when they brought these
incidentally, this is also the time period in this country, because this was happening on land-grant universities all over the country. This is also when things like jazz studies became a thing.
That's right.
Jazz studies, they could go down to the 52nd Street and say, hey, you want to be a college professor? Does it pay? Yeah, it's like a regular salary. Dude, I'm there, man. You know,
yes,
it's
exactly.
and all of a sudden, all these jazz musicians start flooding all the land-grant universities to teach, you know?
Well, it was it was kind of a more based in, do people have the skills? And you're trying to learn from the people who have the skills. And then those people will develop skills. And then at some point, that was the concept. If you have women who understand the women's issues or Black issues they teach for a while, eventually you're going to have people with a BA, and then you'll have people with a master's, and then they can be teaching, and you kind of, so without going too far, I was in one of those colleges. For a while, it was called College F. Then it got called Tolstoy College because that was the closest they could figure out of what we were doing. We were dealing with the history of anarchism and what is workers' rights and unions and collective bargaining and collectives, and the idea of cooperatives. So we were doing a lot of group and process and stuff like that. But during that time period, Leslie Fiedler created his English department with Robert Creeley and a whole bunch of other beat poets. So suddenly Gary Snyder, William Burroughs, all these people were coming to the campus to read or just be there. So I was in the college, but the overall university was having this. So I was going to a lot of events. So I would always see all these folks and kind of got encouraged. But like I said, I didn't see myself too much as a writer back then. I just was trying to figure out how to write myself and do that, and saw that they were an example of saying, right, you know, that's about it.
Interesting.
I left there, and I left there because of how the university was being run, and they just wanted huge classes. And actually, by 75, the student population had really changed. People didn't see the need to actually go to classes to talk. They'd be like, I'm just going to graduate school. I mean, my older brother did all this, and they don't have jobs. So, you know, I'm going for jobs, you know. I was like, who cares whether we talk together? I'm just going to tell you my opinion. It's like, no, we're going to try to actually.
It's sort of like that transition of all school, whether it's called so or not, is vocational. Like, you can't get a job if you study that. So we're going to ridicule that curriculum.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting.
And discourage people from going and getting that career, you know.
That's right.
That track.
So I went through a little bit of a change there, because also somewhere in there, I went to a Clash concert and almost got beat up because the punks there were telling me that hippies were dead, and the whole hippie thing was dead. And, you know, so I was representational of that, you know. So at some point I actually even tried to cut my hair or do something, and came here to try something totally new, and realized, no, I was into food co-ops, and all the things I was into, I was still into. And I started to juggle a little bit, and I didn't know it. So, you know how fate, there's something happened. So, you know, here I moved to this area, and I'm out in the streets doing a little bit of my juggling. And someone says to me, "Oh, you came for the International Juggling Association?" And I was like, "I don't even know what you're talking about." They said, "Oh, it's going to be at Hampshire College next, weekend." So
see, that's something that can only happen in the Pioeneer Valley of Massachusetts.
I think it happens. Well,
or like Ann Arbor or something.
We were talking about this in people's lives. I guess you guys could think about too. I mean, I think if you are open, I mean, you can have a plan, but if you're open, you suddenly realize weird circumstances gave you an opportunity to do this or that. You didn't think you wanted to do that. And next thing you kind of look into that, and that led to something totally else that you
Right.
go, and somebody goes, well, how did you get that? And you go, I was here. I mean, so I went. So like this, I'm in the street. If I didn't go into the street trying to do my juggling, no one would have told me. There I was doing my juggling. Someone tells me, I go there, I walk into a room of 800 people throwing things around,
Wow.
and I'm like, oh, wow, this is like a thing, I'm not just juggling. Short end of that, because that could be a whole story. I basically become a professional juggler, and for 20 years make my living going around juggling.
Wow.
And so I had to write my own scripts, and I was in solos, duets, 4 guys. There was a group called the Wright Brothers. We were in various things, and we had to write things because the juggling tricks never changed, but my rap changed depending on who hired.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Interesting.
it's funny that people don't realize, right? When you're doing a discipline like that for as long as you did it, and then there's the entertainment value. Well, the entertainment value is a whole package, right? So there's all this stuff that you gotta work out, work on, that people don't realize, like, that's the work, that's the craft, right? There's a craftsmanship. I mean, there's a technical side to that, whether it's juggling, music, poetry, whatever. But then there's the, how do I, and if it's a performance, right? How do we produce that? How does it become the performance? And that's what you're about to describe. So I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. No, jump in anywhere here. That's all cool. It's interesting. I was having this discussion with someone before, because my analogy was, any craft, writing, playing music, you have to be able to play enough that people go, okay, this guy is good, or that I recognize that song. They're not just strumming. Right. Okay, I'm not dropping all the time. I've got, the things are, oh, wow, he's doing 5 balls. Okay, most people can't do 3. So now
you're not hitting anybody.
Yeah, and suddenly you have credibility. Right. But at the juggling festivals, you would see these guys doing 7 clubs and bouncing a ball on their head and all this stuff. And you would watch it, and all the jugglers would be amazed. But then the jugglers would even talk among themselves. After a minute or 2 of watching this guy do this, it was boring. And you realize, oh, an audience is not going to, and one guy actually really made a whole thing of it. He made these movies of showing him doing 3 balls and eating an apple and spitting out the apple while he's juggling, and the crowd just going wild. And then him standing there doing 7 balls and nobody cares.
Wow. It's like it's like the jazz solo that you take and you're like, that was my greatest moment just happened, and you're at a cocktail party.
Yes.
Exactly. Like, everyone's just doing, nothing's changed out here. It's like, I just had a moment, nobody's heard it.
Maybe somebody in the corner, you said here. Thank you. Thanks. Over there, wherever that was over there.
That's my favorite guy.
The tree falls in the woods. Yeah, nobody heard that.
I mean, I think that's any artist who's thinking about doing their art, that's a big question about where are you doing your art, which audiences are you doing your art for, and then if you really think you're going to sell your art, then it's like, well, wait a minute, what does the public actually want to buy? And then do you want to do that? Because that may not be your art. And like you said, oh, okay, great. I really feel great about my guitar playing, and all the gigs I have are in these rooms where no one actually cares whether I'm playing, but they think it's cool to have musicians there playing. You know what I mean? Right. And are you happy with that? Can you live with that? And you go, well, okay, those gigs will pay for everything. And meanwhile, then I don't have to get paid for my experimental gigs. Quote, experimental gigs,
You find those little niches in your life and your career, whatever, so that you get a balance of satisfaction financially and artistically and whatever the hell else.
Right. So related to this in terms of tie it into writers, I realized that once I stopped doing the juggling for various reasons, because they're all, could be longer stories, but basically I did for a long time. I wrote a lot of stuff. But when I went to, and I was always writing, and then when I decided I was going to do my writing, I came at it from differently than most writers because you have to sell yourself as a juggler. And, you know, as you know, as a musician, if I'm not putting out the promo, I'm not sending out the stuff or contacting the venues or having the website that goes there, and you're looking for it. Oh, is there a summer concert in the park? Is there this there that they might hire me? Most writers aren't thinking that. They're home writing, and then they're thinking of publishers coming to them, or they're sending it maybe.
Yeah.
And so when I used all that skill to suddenly search, and I was saying to somebody, you know, I see Facebook differently than people complain about it. I mean, it's an amazing, these social media things are amazing databases. And so if someone's wrote that they're a writer with their name, and I put in, I'm looking for writers, oh, who's this guy in Austin? And okay, I send him a little of my work and ask him who he is, and he friends me. And then all of a sudden he tells me there's a festival in Austin I should come to. And then all of a sudden there I am, and I go to it. I make, you know, oh, now I'm on that stage, and now these people ask me to go to the festival in Philly because they saw me in Austin. And that's kind of where writers aren't usually thinking that. And then the other part was people started asking me to do workshops because they would say, how come you got on the stage and the audience quieted down? I mean, they listened to you. And I was like, well, did you fix the mic? Did you, you know, and none of them have any stage. It's not like anybody is, you know, bad or dumb or anything. It's like, what do you study? And so if you're always in your room writing, then you didn't take the courses I did while I was doing all my juggling to meet directors to get stage presence.
Right.
It's a whole different skill. Like I had one example when I was in Austin, 4 or 5 of us were hitting a lot of stages, and we were all getting pretty good reactions. And this guy who was kind of one of the famous people there as a feature, the first night he read, people didn't almost realize who he was because he was such a bad reader. And so after a couple of days, he had watched us, and he came up to the 5 of us and asked us, gave us each a poem and asked each of us to read one of his poems and then tell people that it was his poems. So we did that, all of us got really good reactions. And then he came to the festival organizers and said, okay, thanks. I'm now realizing I'm not going to read ever again. And they said, what are you talking about? And he said, this is a skill. I don't have the time. I'm not interested in trying to do it. I'm way too nervous. I don't like being in front of people. If people like my books, I'm just going to go and write, and I'll see if my books, and if it hurts me selling my books, well, I guess I got to figure that out. But I'm not going to put myself in this position anymore because I'm just seeing that was an awful experience, and I don't know what to do. You know, like this, I don't have this, that's a real training. And that was just an interesting insight. I realized, oh yeah, I guess, you know, people have to put that together because they've created a thing called performance poetry. And in a way, you have to say, anytime you step in front of an audience, you're performing.
Right.
That's right. That's right. And you are 100% correct. It's a different skill. You know what I mean? And it might not just be a skill that you want to. I don't know how you feel about this personally, but I don't think any artist, it's like, it's okay. It's not a right or wrong. You have various skill sets in whatever medium or mediums you want to work in, and you choose the ones that you either want to do or you're good at. I mean, we do the same thing in business. It has a parallel. You decide what you're good at and what you want to do. And if you're smart, those will be the things you focus on. Now, the other things that you're good at and you don't want to do, but are still essential, or that you just suck at, you find people to surround yourself with that are really good at those things. And there you go. That's your team. And if you do that, if you don't do that, no matter how good you are at the things you're good at, the business is not going to come together. It's not going to hum. It's not going to be a good piece of art. But the same thing goes for crafting any sort of artistic medium. There's all these things that you need, but to make a whole project happen, to make a whole career consistently as a crafter, it's creating something that's consistently good. Mm-hmm. But and if you ignore those things you're not so good at, though they're essential to the craft, you know, it compromises the project somehow. Possibly, you know.
I was turned on to this book that when I first started, it was actually for magicians, but it was about performing. And it was kind of cool. What the guy basically said was, look, anybody can make the rabbit disappear. So now you've got 8 guys in your town who makes the rabbit disappear. Why is anybody hiring any one of you guys? Or you could say, I need a jazz guitarist, and there's these 5 jazz guitarists, and so you're all going to play the same things, right? Or stand. I mean, as far as how they think about it, sometimes, we just need a jazz guitarist. No, there's a lot of different kind of jazz guitarists. There's actually a lot of different kind of magicians. But basically, the guys rapping the book was they're not hiring that; they're hiring you.
Yeah.
And nobody.
Well, do you think that?
And nobody
can
be you.
Right.
Do you think academia has something to do with this too? In other words, as all of these, it's basically folk art we're talking about, right? And when that suddenly you could get degrees in that stuff, and I'm not knocking going to school. I have a music degree, I have a business degree and a music degree. But the thing, what I'm getting at is all of a sudden the vaudevillians understood this, right? Sammy Davis Jr.'s generation, right? That came out, they came of age during that. Like we all know not Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich as a drummer, and he was a drummer. But Buddy Rich literally was born and grew up and toured with his parents since he was an infant. Buddy Rich could tap dance, he could sing, he could recite poetry and famous speeches. Why is this? Because Buddy Rich grew up in vaudeville, and in vaudeville, you never know what they're going to ask you to do and when they're going to need to do it. And by the way, you have to be absolutely, not only, as you're saying right now, not only really good at it technically, but you have to have a shtick that separates you from everybody else on the team. Otherwise, we don't need you. Because it's not.
I don't know, how do you work with people? Because if I go to hire you and you're a pain, or you've got 10 things that you have to have before you do, or you complain because I suddenly say, yeah, that's the stage and there's no lights, or the phone, whatever doesn't work, and you go, okay, but you try to figure out how to help make it work. That's different. They're going to remember you because, like, okay, you came and you did what you said you were going to do. Since you brought up the vaudeville, it's interesting because I studied that a lot, and we could compare it to now of how our art's going to be bought. I mean, our art's going to be bought all on the phone. And historically now, it's the same thing as those vaudeville guys who could tell the same joke in Chicago and the same joke in New York died when radio happened, the new technology, because someone would go, we heard that joke. Do you have another joke? Right. Oh, you were a one joke guy. Okay, well, we're not with goodbye, And so all the folks who made it out of some of those, like you said, either had multi-talents or could keep creating. And so they realized, okay, we got to come up with another stick now. We got to come up with another one. And then when it hit TV, it was another dividing line. The best example was the guy who was the lion in the Oz. Bert, and he was supposedly one of the most outrageous improvisers, coming to an audience and feeling the audience and running. And they'd always ask him, what are you going to do? And he'd always be like, I don't know. I have to see who's out there and what's out there. So when he went to TV, there was no audience for a while, and he just was like, it wasn't working because he was making all the cameramen laugh, but it was like, I don't get it. And then when they had an audience, they were like cutting them. Like there are only 2 or 3 actually footage of him. You see that he's building something and he's going, and then he looks and he goes, oh, eat it, go to your freaking commercial. I'm not breaking now. This is like, I'm building the audience, like, right. My shtick isn't like 2 minutes, So, and we could go on with all those kinds of stories, but I think it was it's an example of realizing that you may have your art, and then actually David Burns got a great little, if you look for it, a talk, 20-minute talk about, does the venue create the art? So literally, if you're thinking that all your art's only going to be seen on the phone, then are you working your art to work better on the phone, or you, and or you're saying, no, I'm going to have my art
radio format would be another example of
yes,
that,
exactly.
Right? You got to have it's got to be radio format ready, or right. It's 10 to 12 tracks on these CDs, bud.
Right.
That's LP, not right. 14.
Yeah, right.
And so with the time running, I want to jump a little bit to it's an encouragement as far as artists. So just the idea is that once I started going to those festivals and I was out there, when I came back to the Valley at the time, 10, 12 years ago, 13 years, there wasn't a lot of venues for poetry or spoken word. There was a couple of writing groups, a couple of places. And Austin's Poetry Festival really inspired me because it was kind of for everybody. They covered, okay, we're going to pay people who everybody thinks are the people. We're going to have features, but we're just going to have a lot of stages. And if you don't have money and you can't join it, we're even going to have a couple of free venues.
Interesting. So it's
And
an awful lot like a lot of the festivals in Montreal then, whether they're music or there's a circus festival, but it's kind of the same thing where, there's the official there's several tiers in the official festival, if you will, the paid performer, but then basically the whole city is a venue for, you can get up and you can start doing it,
Right. And if the crowd is going wild with you, then someone sees you and you might be in the paid next year. Who knows?
Yeah.
Wow.
But so I basically came back and said, wait, we got all these bookstores, we got venues, and Austin was a little bit different because they kind of had poetry things in venues that would normally not have. So I started thinking about furniture stores because there were couches already. And I kind of started approaching businesses to say, hey, this could be kind of getting people to your store who don't normally come. And it just takes a little bit of us clearing an area so 20, 30 people can be in here to watch 4 writers, or you know what I mean, or something. And I wasn't sure about that. And so just, you have to try it. So I came back and I tried, I asked a couple of people, they told me I could hook up with this other video festival was happening. I kind of put out the word, and all of a sudden I had 30 writers. And so like, okay, I must have hit a vein here. Something's happening. I pulled that off. The next year, all of a sudden I had about 70 writers. And then I decided to go to 2 days. And then suddenly I was 4 days. And then I went to 6 days, which was almost insane.
Wow.
And then I'm back to 4 days. But then it also got into, venues. And in the beginning, it was like, I'd go someplace in the restaurant and say, oh, you poets are coming. Okay, great. You can use those 3 tables over there. And it's like, no, I want the room. I'm going to set up a mic. I want the whole room. Who's going to come? What do you mean you want the room? You're like, oh, who's going to know there's poetry? So on that note, again, in terms of thinking about stuff, my first festival was called the Poetry Festival. From then on, I called it a word festival.
Okay.
Because
to this day, doesn't it?
Yes. Because people started to say, poetry, I'm not going to a poetry festival. I hate poetry. I did that. When it was a word festival, it got amorphous enough of what's a word festival? I don't know. Do you like to read? Do you like words? I mean, it's
yeah.
And then
what
people
like words, man. Right. It's like words like ice cream.
Well, it also opened up so people could read prose, short story, anything could happen. I also made it so that people, because what I liked about Austin, I didn't want to curate. So some people got mad at me because I wouldn't curate, and oh man, that person was awful. And I would say, listen, everyone's getting 5 minutes or they're getting 10 minutes. And I actually started, before I started doing my festival, with a monthly reading, and I used sand timers. And the reason I did that, I had 2 sand timers, and what I wanted was the responsibility of the writer and the audience together to realize we've got an hour and 10 minutes and we're going to have, 6 people. So they got to all do 10 minutes. They can't go over 10 minutes. I don't care if your time's up and you say, well, I only got 2 more pages. Well, no, that's going to be another 3 minutes. That means someone else isn't going to get their time if we're not limited. So just when the sand runs out at 5 minutes, you're gone. And what's happened is it created a couple of things. It relaxed people because people will get worried at these events, like, oh no, do I have to listen to this person? How long? And are they just going to keep going? And who's going to get them off the stage? And all of a sudden it's this hassle, or it's a tension. Now it's like, okay. And what it did is I also think it opened up people to listen to people that they didn't think they liked, because they would start and it was like, okay, I got to give them 5 minutes. And so you're sitting there, and then somewhere through there you go, oh, that guy, that was pretty good. Or that was, whatever it was.
Well, it feels like that kind of format, there could be relatively well-known artists that you don't like, but suddenly you like this performance and you go, okay, now I've got to go back. I got to reread. I got to whatever, right? Then you're also giving, since we're talking about craft and being serious about stewarding craft, like people come out of obscurity and they have their 5 minutes. And how the hell else do you hone your skills? There's nothing like getting up on stage in front of people. There's just this stuff that happens. and you can make connections with the audience, there is no way to rehearse that. You know what I mean? Like you
Yes.
have to,
Oh, totally.
you have to connect with an audience. You can't do this in your basement. And they might discover people get discovered that way. I mean, the comedians understand this implicitly. This is why people go to comedy nights, because Out of Obscurity Tonight could become the next big star, and I want to say that I was there at the beginning, you know, that kind of thing. And it's like, and you don't get better unless you do that over and over and over again, and you hone it. And it's that whole testing, and that's the exciting part of it too. Watching people that are, you know, that live thing is like people operating at the ceiling of their capability, and that's where everything gets exciting, and there's a lot of anticipation and stuff, you know.
Right.
Oh, you're so right on, Scott. I mean, I get this asked all the time about rehearsing, and I say there is, as you said, there is no rehearsing for the stage. And if you hit the stage 50 times, okay, you hit it 300 times, you hit it 1,000 times, like you said, everything that's possibly could happen is going to happen then.
Right.
And you're going to have a different whole aspect. One, about just walking up there. You've walked up there 500 times. And so, you know, you're not, and you know how to adjust a mic stand. I did this one workshop in Austin. I brought a mic stand, and I said to everybody, do you know what these 3 knobs do? People were like, no, I don't want to touch it. You know, it's like, okay, well, you unscrew it and it moves up and down. You don't have to bend. Yeah, you don't have to bend down below this thing, you know, and nobody can see you. But anyways, so I sort of felt like my role was to help. One is, there weren't venues, so I mean, I think what I learned, to round all the way back from the college F in terms of teaching, I came from a time period, I'm an old guy, so in the 60s, 70s, the saying was, what's happening? You were thinking that you were going to make something happen, you were going to go to something that was happening, other people were making things happen. When we move to the time period of whatever, that's already like a time period where you think it's not going to happen. You're going to do something to me I don't want you to do, and maybe you're going to try to explain it to me, and I don't really care. Get it over with and whatever. Okay,
whatever.
Right.
Whatever.
I don't want to listen.
Yeah. And then it kind of moves to it's all good, and it's like, well, it's not actually. It's not. You're screwing me. It's not. So I did a couple workshops with some folks, and it was kind of like, well, how did this happen? I was like, well, I just I started putting out papers saying I was having a festival. They said, well, what if no one came? And be like, well, then I'd know, I guess, or maybe my posters were lousy. I don't know.
You don't have to worry about people hating you or anything, or thinking you're a loser for it, because nobody knows.
But they were worried about making mistakes. They kept asking me who were the professionals I was getting to do this and that. And I basically said, if there isn't anybody, I'm doing it. And yeah, now that I've done it all this time, if I would have known all the things I was going to run into, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I had passion for it and I wanted to do it. And so I just went along and said, okay, that didn't work, I'm going to try this. Okay, this didn't work, I'm going to try that. And one of the things was, if there's, you know, this is a historical thing. I mean, there were famous painters in France. All the galleries were not showing their kind of paintings. And all of a sudden they got together and said, we're just going to have our own show. Right. And then all of a sudden people came and they were like, oh, what is this? So, you know, if you have a particular, I mean, think of like, you know, I don't know, various music before. I mean, they weren't all the same genres. And some people suddenly, you know, you could say, oh, about jazz. Oh, well, now are you playing standards? Are you playing this? Oh, no, in that club, I don't know. Those guys just pick up their instruments and they screech all night. I don't know. Is that music? I don't know. You know, and it's like, you know, and so, you know, do you have an ear for it? Do you understand? Do you create your own audience who wants to come to hear that? Or now it's got to be defined. Oh, you know, they do performance poetry. No, they read off the page. They, you know, no, it's spoken word.
And I have a question regarding that too. You know, we introduced you as the U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate, right? As people over the years have attached to your name, you know, beat, right? Even that in and of itself. Have you ever worried that, oh man, only in that, like, I'm a big fan of beat literature. I'm a big fan of Kerouac, Ginsberg, all of them, okay? Now it's been 70 years, and there's the real art that was created. There's the lasting effect that's had. There's the counterculture that created subsequent countercultures after it, even though each subsequent counterculture either hated the new generation or the generation prior, right? You had an example of that with the punks, right? Like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and, you know, but when you say beat, you know, a lot of people who just aren't acquainted go, oh, just what you're saying. They've pigeonholed it, right? Beret, drums, really stupid monosyllabic, you know, like, and it's like, well, that actually, that was never what the beats were. That was people making fun of the beats 70 years ago. That's an old bad joke.
Yeah, I mean, I just watched, and I got a chance to perform with him a little bit, but he's putting up a show. David Amaran, who played
Oh, of
music
course.
on the movie, and also Pull My Daisy, and also played with Kerouac. He was
Yeah.
reading Sunday about when Kerouac died. He wrote this little statement up, and it was about, saying, listen, try to read all his books because that's really what he wanted, and you're just pigeonholing him on this one book. And this one magazine actually offered him money and said to him, could you come during the funeral and make sure that you have a black beret and wear sandals, and we'd like to have you stand next to the coffin. And he was like, no. And then he reread his statement, and then they were like, okay, so what do you have to say about it? And it was all about, he goes, nobody was listening to me. Nobody
Right.
actually they had what they thought beats were. For me,
Wow.
as you go along, you get different labels. So, like I said, that guy from Austin suddenly started calling me that, and that got put out there for a little while, Assassin of Apathy. And I was like, okay, do I need a handle, like the hip hop guy, do you need to create this identity? And I kind of dropped it for a while, didn't have that at all. And then all of a sudden I won this award, and then it was like, okay, so do I carry that now, or I just have that in the back? And, if someone wants my resume, I can say, yeah, I got that, and keep trying to figure out how to define who I am. And then people will say to me, because sometimes I do stuff and they say, oh, you should do stand-up. And it's like, well, stand-up is not the crowd, and stand-up is not the crowd I actually want to do.
No,
I'm trying to do something else, and stand-up is expecting that there's more one line, or yeah, I'm humorous, and some of my stuff is going to be funny, but some stuff is not. So, and then I kind of, my recent project with Do It Now is, 3 major musicians who are in the Valley, Tony Bacon, John Sheldon, and sometimes Joe Salins and some other folks. And I from watching everything, I really wanted to be an instrument. So I saw that some poets, and I got, when I was traveling around, I got a chance to be with a lot of different musicians, and I would watch other poets, and I started to realize musicians were reacting to me, and some of them would say, we don't want to play with these other poets. And when I would try to find out why, they said, well, like you said about the music, they think I'm just there in the background, and they just went up there and they took their poem and they just read it straight through. They didn't care that the musicians were playing. They didn't listen to the musicians reacting to them play. And I knew that the guys that I was asking to do this, because it was my idea to call them to one rehearsal. And I said, I just want to try something. And, you guys all have your projects, but I'd like to see if something could work. And then if it could, I have a gig that I'd like us to do. And so they said, sure. And we had such a good time that then they did the gig, and then it kind of went from there. And our second performance, we got asked to go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So it kind of just took off. But what it was me starting a story or a line, and then they get a mood from that, and they start playing maybe in that mood. And then I get affected by that mood, and I'm doing something. And we're watching each other. I mean, I'm looking to realize, oh, it looks like you're starting to run on a solo. Go for it. You probably know this, Scott, from jazz.
Like you would do if you were all instrument. Well, at that point, you're not like an instrumentalist. You are an instrument. And that's actually, I have to tell you, that's one of the things I like about your performances with the band is exactly that. I mean, you're an actual instrumentalist on stage. You happen to be using your poetry in a very particular kind of performance way, right? So you're not singing, okay?
Right.
But you're all watching each other. You're all doing exactly what jazz musicians or I hate, it's jazz, that's jazz, not the genre, but jazz to jazz, right? You are improvising and you're watching each other, and there's a dialogue going on stage. And that is the exciting part if people get that. if the whole point is an improvisation, that is the improvisation. That is the art that's being created.
Right.
But that's, it goes back to your other question to tie it in, is when you say beat, you could say if you said improvisational, you would cut your audience.
Right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, it's tough, right? And this is why I ask you that question about, like, when people, anytime somebody, I know they mean it in a positive light, right? But then you go, oh man, because as particularly over the last, as art and commerce sort of meet, it's over the last 75 years or so, it's really pigeonholed people into, it's like, a more contemporary equivalent, although that's 40 years ago, is, Elvis Costello, he's part of punk, or the Police, and they're like, well, not really, but okay, because that will sell records right now, maybe.
So I think that the only thing what's changed now, and maybe some young artists have it and they're doing it, and you need to have the social media skills, or you need to have the computer skills to do it, is that you are creating your own audience. So this new venue here now seems to be, if you can get watched, and then you can get people to start passing you on, and they're passing you on to other people who want improvisation and want words, and you suddenly find this niche. An example I just read a couple of years ago that made me think, oh, this is really wild. They did a thing about, and it goes back to many things you brought up, Scott, of they were asking, okay, who's sold the most, quote, poetry books? So they go and they find this guy who turns out, didn't go to Greenfield Community College for his MFA. He went to Yale, so, okay, oh, he's in Yale. Oh, because he went to Yale, there were magazines at Yale that published his things. Oh, they're the magazines. And then because he was in those magazines, he got this book offer, and he published, and he sold 20,000 copies. Okay, so is that what you can expect? That's the route. This is how you get stamped. This is what you do. That's what you'll sell. So then they went to sales, and they find this guy who sold 100,000 books. And they were like, well, who's this guy? Lives with his parents in the basement, has a podcast, been blogging over the years, has 300,000 followers. At some point says to him, I'm putting out my first 2 years in this book, 100,000 of them bought it. Right. So they go and they get the book, and they go, well, it's okay, and it's not bad. And they go to the people who bought the book and say, why'd you buy it? I like it. I like the guy. I like what he says. And so they were like, oh, wait a minute. So this has changed everything now. Nobody's telling them this is the guy they should listen to. Nobody says he has any awards that he's worthy of. We should listen to him. They want to listen to him.
It's the old Duke Ellington, well, Duke, what's good music? Well, what do you like? Well, what do you mean what I like? That's not what's important. It's what you like. It's important what you like. That's good. That's what's good. It's the same fear. It's that deep-seated fear, right? We needed the critics, and we needed these people and this whole infrastructure that broke down, that you're talking about, the breakdown of it, where, like, what's good art? I don't know. Well, don't you go to museums and take a look? Yeah, but I don't know what's good. And it's like, well, do you freaking like it? If you like it, it's good to you. You know what I mean? And that fear keeps people from going to the museum. It keeps them from going to poetry readings. It keeps them from buying books. It keeps them from buying wine, right? I don't know what's good wine. Well, go with it, man.
Yeah, but see that,
you like it?
Yeah,
it's good.
I would say that there's been because I was involved in kind of radical education from that time period to what I saw now of the leave no child behind and no testing and all that. I feel it was a systematic cutting of arts, cutting of reflective learning. Okay, I put my hand on this, it's hot. Okay, so do I keep putting my hand on it? Okay, so if I keep putting my hand on it, what am I not getting? Okay, can I trust my feelings that, oh, it's hot, I shouldn't put my hand on there. And to not have fear, to trust what you just said. I just took this sip of wine. I don't like it. Everybody says this is the most expensive wine. It's supposed to be the best tasting. I don't like it. It's okay for me not to like it. I'm not, inferior. I'm not a lower being because I don't understand the fine taste. Right. I don't like it. And that's has really affected everything, because it even affects people taking a blank sheet of paper with some paint and trying to paint and not going after, an hour or so, okay, I guess I'm not a painter. It's like,
Right.
no, that's not how that works. Like you said, not instead of 1,000 hours on the stage, no, maybe 500 canvases that you've repainted over and redone this and whatever. That now you're starting to think.
Take the journey. Take the journey, because if you don't like that, well, yeah, but what if it's not good? It's not even about that. Like you have to go down this path.
Why isn't that? Why don't people have that thought? I mean, isn't that why we have 73 million people who voted for somebody who was lying?
Well, it's funny. This is the perfect segue into it, and I have some politics related questions for you related to your writing and to the band.
Okay.
So let's segue right into that. You're one of the few guests we've had where, when the subject of how we got here from an artistic standpoint and say public education, I am of the opinion, having been a public music educator and having been around public education, including business-related courses and arts-related courses, that I'm inclined to say that it has been a systemic, gradual, incrementally, so people wouldn't notice, a systemic release of curricula, not just the fine and performing arts, but things like history. And so it's more about what isn't taught and how much time or is not given to a curricula, as opposed to if we had said tomorrow all of this just goes away, people would freak out. We need history, we need math, we need sciences, we need music, we need visual arts to be taught. So you can't do it that way, but what you can do is very gradually come up with reasons why we have less time for it. And then something that would have happened during the school day is now before school or after school, which limits the number of kids that could do it in the first place. We certainly limit it more in poorer school districts than we do wealthy. Now, why is that? That's because rich people understand that their kids need this stuff. And over the decades, as a business person and as an advocate for the arts and different things, I've had people say to me, well, no, we recognize why we need this. And we also recognize I don't want to pay for it for those kids over there to have it. Not everybody needs to have it. I've heard people directly say that to me. So do I think it's systemic? Yes. Do I think it's one body saying, conspiracy theory? It's not tin hat type shit, but it's incrementally been purged, because when I was finishing college 20 years ago, all the business magazines and I remember an article in the Globe, they did a whole series on creativity in business and how it was going to be needed more than ever. That's when you started to see those terms like Richard Florida's term in the early aughts of the creative class, and how cities that embrace the creative class theory are going to succeed, and those that don't embrace, diversity and all that are going to fail. Now, a lot of that has come to pass, right? I happen to believe he's right. And, but what's happened though, is the majority of, at least in this country, the majority of people kind of seem okay with that. And that's a problem. That's not just a political problem, but what do we do with that? You just said it perfectly. Like 70 some odd million people said more of that, please.
Well, I mean, I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh when I was driving back from gigs so I could stay awake, because it would get instructional. So mad.
You got to hear what the other side's saying every once in a
while.
while.
I would get so mad. I would get so mad that it would get me going, that it would keep me from falling asleep. But what I learned from it was like, oh, this is an interesting tack. This is a while. In other words, you say a couple truths. 2 and 2 is 4. And 4 is 8, and 8 is 16. And then suddenly you're at 72, and it's Muslims, and it's lesbians, or it's people of color. And you go, wait a minute, how did you make that jump? So, okay, after I got fished in with about 4 or 5 feelings, things I think are true,
alignments with your emotion.
I got led down to a point, and then all of a sudden it was like, wow, how did that one come in? Now I'm not paying attention. Yeah, or somehow now I'm not paying attention anymore. Or it goes back to what you said. I don't have enough self-confidence to doubt, to go, wait a minute, that's not right, actually. I And then to say that, because, oh no, everybody else thinks it's right. So you go, oh, okay, maybe I just don't understand. And yeah, they seem to have, trucks and cars and they're not working, whatever the races, and, also you get all this stuff that happens.
Yeah.
But I also, I have to say this about what's going on now in terms of, so I grew up with a lot of things that we were told we were seeing conspiracies. Oh, they're having the Vietnam War to move drugs. Oh, the El Salvador, guns and money, and then many years later found out, no, that was true.
Well, yeah, it's Jack Kerouac, his last interview. Remember, he says something like, he says to William F. Buckley something like, South Vietnamese, they want us there because they like our Jeeps. It turns out that was totally true.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Right. Whatever the stuff is. I mean, but the problem is that it seems there's some of those seem so outrageous that they seem like they couldn't have been true because you couldn't believe that your government or people would do that.
Yeah, surely an august body of people such as our community would never.
But say now you have this thing like, say, with Q and stuff. I mean, this is taken away from the arts, but it is, you suddenly are gripping and grabbing. I mean, we're talking about using a technology that gives you access to all kinds of things. And then you're trying to get your artwork out through there. And then you're trying to deal with, oh, wait a minute, there's all these clubs. So if I suddenly say I'm against vaccinations, then do I join this group? Because, oh no, I'm not against all vaccinations. Polio, measles worked. I'm just sort of curious about this. Oh wait, the general flu vaccines don't seem to work, or low percentage, or they do work for some people. So do I have to take it? No, you can't get in that discussion. You're in like one club or another. And that part has made it really difficult to have any of these kind of conversations. And like you said,
and then on top of it, it aggregates because of algorithms that were designed to do so. You get afraid of seeing what the other side's talking about, because for the next 5 hours, Facebook's sending you ads or sending you sources that justify this. And you go, well, it's a little wonder that people who are relatively, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it sounds snobby, but weak-minded, people who don't practice intellectual rigor, not because they're stupid, but because they've had a lifetime of peers and mentors telling them not to.
That's right.
Well, you just get smart people fall into the same trap. You have to constantly be saying, it's basically this. It's making a choice to decide each and every day. Do I believe what I just read? I got to make a choice. And you really don't have a way to know unless you were there, right? So,
and it gets tiring, and you got too many other things. Like you said, you've got kids. They want to do this, they want to do. All right, just tell me which way to go. I mean, I can't look at it up now, right, or something, But this gets back to, we're keeping in terms of, because there's lots of tangents here, but for the artist community, for myself, is complicated of who am I and what am I presenting. I'm glad to hear you and I haven't talked, and you saw my performances and you picked up on, okay, these guys are improvising. You could see as a musician that, okay, we're watching each other. We're doing this. Maybe somebody in the regular public has no idea, and they're wondering, well, I saw you reading it. How are you doing that? And maybe not even appreciate it, or see us a second time and go, you didn't do that like you did it last time. It's like, well, yeah, no, we didn't. I know I didn't even do that piece. I don't even have that material. I wasn't thinking about that. I'm talking about something else today. And so then you go, okay, wow, how viable is this? Am I actually doing it to sell it? Well, yes, if I consider myself an artist, then I am trying to figure out how to survive. And maybe you do what Bukowski says, no, you work for the post office and you do your writing somewhere else. And so nobody can tell you how to write because you're not, that's not what's going on. And you hope that the books go somewhere else on their own. It's a complicated aspect for you to, one, do you take the time to find out what kind of art you're doing? I think it's a conflict when they say, oh, stereotype artists are poor. Well, in some ways you have to make a choice. If you're really going to be an artist, then you have to take that time. And sometimes you can't do that 40 hours or 60 hours because you're not going to have any energy or strength to do any of your art. So you're going to have to say, I'm going to dive in as a musician. I'm going to keep playing. Okay, I'm going to get the gigs at weddings. I'm going to get this gig. I'm going to make those gigs work. And then, you know, hopefully maybe enough money will come through. So now I can still go to other clubs and find the other musicians that I want to play how I want to play, you know,
Right.
and maybe then that will get recorded and something will happen and somebody will see me as, oh, wow, you guys are really doing some new improvised stuff, you know. And so those are the tough decisions you have to make. And you're, you know, and sometimes you can't ride that middle road. You know, you can say that, but, you know, after a while, I think you'll sometimes see I'm just too exhausted from trying to do all that other stuff. Or if I'm trying to have a relationship also, and I got somebody else I want to talk to, oh, I'm trying to have kids also, you know, they got dental bills and they got this and they got, you know, I mean, you're suddenly into a different realm, you know, and so, I mean, some artists have decided not to have kids because of that. So you get into this, okay, you're making big decisions here about really what matters to you. Did you want that or did you want this? And so, you know,
Well, and we're increasingly getting away from a space where art and commerce can peaceably live. You know what I mean? And I think it all gets back to a major way to turn this around is to create new generations of art lovers, art consumers. I'm not saying on its face you can't have capitalism and art. I think what I would be saying is our particular form of capitalism, which is imbalanced for everybody, including artists, needs to be brought back into balance. And that, coupled with a rethinking of how we educate people to appreciate the fine and performing arts and interact with the fine and performing arts, will make for a bigger marketplace for all of us. And then we can experiment. We're artists. We can experiment ourselves with our own financial models to make this work, and we'll find it. We're the most resilient people. Poor people in general, regardless of whether they're artists or not, it's hard to be poor. You got to strategize. Rich people don't strategize.
Right.
Not beyond a certain point. They don't have to. They can take all the risk they want because they're never going to not be poor if they make mistakes. Poor people they can't make mistakes. It's a zero.
Yeah, or you realize you got to make mistakes and you're not going anywhere for bottom anymore, so you might as well try.
Or that, and that of course gives you freedom, right? Yeah, that conversely. I want to ask you something about politics and the way it's hard in any performance art to infuse that performance with politics and have it come off, right? Sometimes it seems insincere, other times it might seem preachy. I've watched a bunch of your stuff, and it's never seemed that way. You always assume intelligence from your audience, right? Is how much of that is conscious? How much of it is just you guys, you, the writer, and the band, and everybody in general, just doing what you do, and that's the way it comes off because those are the kind of people you are? Like, in other words, I guess what I'm asking is there any strategy behind that, or does it just happen because you guys are good at what you do?
So this brings up an interesting question. You can think about this relationship when you think about your music and other artists think about what they're doing. There's always the question of what does it mean to improvise? So why is one person who brings up and improvises actually comes with 30 years of music education, skill, played every possible scale they could do? Or Jimi Hendrix, his roommate said, I don't think he took off his guitar even when he went into the shower. And that you just live with this thing and find out what it does. And now when you go to improvise, it's not like the person who ran down to the store, bought a guitar, went to the coffee house and start going wild on it. And maybe it was good, but there, you know, whether or not they can be consistent or it is any good, you realize that's not necessarily what improvisation is. It is, but it isn't.
Right.
So I've been in front of a lot of crowds with my writing with musicians and non-musicians. And I've come from this history of, yes, I fought for 2.5 years not to go to Vietnam. And it's a whole other story about why I didn't go. And I fought in Buffalo because the air was so bad that if you hung out your laundry, it turned black from the steel mills. So when they left, it devastated the town, but the air got cleaner. And so there's a long history of seeing that people had to fight for, I don't want chunks in my water. And I'm not the person, puppies are cute, but I'm not going to write all about puppies all the time. And there's puppy factories, and there's and there's people who drown puppies, and there's, so, oh, you don't want me to talk about that. Okay, so I won't. So, okay, how can I talk about that? And you might laugh when I talk about that. Oh, but I shouldn't be laughing at that because that's pretty dark. I mean, I've had people before I was in the band come up and go, I really laughed through your set, but I think that was pretty sick. I shouldn't have been laughing at that stuff. And it kind of comes from thinking.
The sincere
well, it kind of comes from the history of Native American clowns. I mean, they really went after the most sacred stuff to, you could say, crap on it, or I'm not sure what you can say on the podcast, but they revered it too. So it was kind of like, how do you look at something that's so sacred and actually make fun of it too, and realize that you could make fun of it? And so I came with that. It wasn't like it just happens. And and also there was a history there about people take in things when you're laughing. When you laugh, you open yourself up. And so it's like George Carlin or some folks. I mean, I saw George Carlin sometimes where it didn't really work. It wasn't funny at all. And he was in a rant because he was just so mad that day about stuff that he was just ranting. Other nights he had put it together that it was hilarious and you were into the rant. So it's a tricky part of, and before we went to Edinburgh, I got criticized a little bit, and someone said, don't talk to me about, I did this show and a professor at Smith kind of went after us about, I was doing something about Cuba and Guantanamo Bay and the prison. And they were like, don't tell me I know about the prison, and I didn't come to a show to have the news told to me. And I thought, well, I'm not just telling the news. And also, we're not talking about, it's still going on. It was supposed to only be open for 7 years. It's like 15 years now, or 22 years, and they're still doing it. So, I want to talk about it. So, and wait a minute, we were the country that said you could have a trial before. So now we're not doing that. Those people are just said they're guilty. They're just in prison. They can't even get lawyers, And I came from Buffalo. I worked at Attica after the riots of all those people being killed. I went there to try to help to figure out, so those people didn't die in vain. Where are we really going to change what they asked to have changed in the prison? So I can't, I think everybody is who they are. So I come with that political part. It wasn't that it just happened. It is me. And I think any artist needs to really go to that part to ask themselves, who am I? What really matters to me? And am I putting that into my art? I mean, is my art the expression of that? Because if it keeps being you, then you have passion for it, and your show has then some kind of passion because you're really coming to it. I'm not acting. I'm not trying to think what's politically correct and, okay, you want to talk about being vegan now, or you want to talk about this, it's like, no, okay, that's not what I really want to do. And I am a political person in the sense of wondering, wow, how come I can't talk to my brother or some relatives because they believe in the people I think are really corrupt? Or how many lies are you going to accept? And you don't want to talk about that they're lies, or you point out that other people lie. And I go, yeah, okay, yeah, they do lie too. But so, we could go on with that. So it's in relation to your question, I was glad that these musicians were okay with what I was saying, because I was worried about, would they say, hey, I don't want to be on the stage with that rap being given. Right. And luckily they felt about those things too. Sometimes they would have said, I wouldn't have said it that way, but I'm not doing the words. You're doing the words.
Right.
And that's a really special thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And when we were in Edinburgh, it was interesting. It really gave us an insight. The audiences came up to us in Edinburgh. We did 12 shows, and the audiences there came up to us and said, are you guys really from America? Because there was a lot of shows. There was 3,000 shows. There's a lot of shows of other countries that were mocking America. So they were like, you guys are Americans? Oh, there are actually people in America who think like you? And you realize, oh, that's right.
Isn't that Were they just fooling around, or were they serious?
No, they're serious, because when you actually talk to them, you realize, okay, what are you getting in Edinburgh, the newspaper, or in England? You're getting the headlines. Oh, you're just getting Trump's tweets.
Right.
You're
right.
not.
Well, because he just sucked up all the air for 4 years. Like, it's astounding, isn't it?
You know, I mean, think about it. Some people don't know that, oh, there were people, I mean, because of us, we knew about Standing Rock, so to speak. But how many people actually knew about Standing Rock? Or how many people only took Standing Rock from the news?
Or how many people saw it, but in the fire hose of dumpster fire that has been put on us, which was a tactic. That's a conscious tactic of this whole thing. And that's bigger than Trump. They used Trump because they understood that he's really good at that.
Right.
He was only part of a larger infrastructure creating that dumpster fire, that fire hose. And that fire hose allowed for this overload so that most people have now just tuned out.
That's right.
Or they've transitioned into, they think they're engaged because they've decided to pick a side, an arbitrary side somewhere, a slice. And that's their main focus. And you can even find a platform for that now.
Yeah, right. And so it's wild. It was wild to have people
of these separations of platforms, which is the ultimate manifestation of the algorithms we were just talking about a little while ago.
That's right.
Now everyone's going to have a platform they can go to, and the only people talking on that platform are the people that already agree with me.
That's right. That's right.
When you think about it, it's the ultimate manifestation of the ego. I mean, so now you're in this place where there could be potentially millions of people, and the sole top priority, maybe the only priority for everyone in there is to act like me, think like me. Because that's what everybody's doing. They're saying what they're saying, not because they have a point they want to get across to people, because they want to spew just because me. It's the me.
It's the me.
But also, as you said, it becomes existential question. I mean, it's much easier to feel that you know, or that it's simple. If suddenly someone says, it's not that simple, actually. It's not even gray. It's like a lot of colors in here. And so it's complicated. Oh, no.
You might not ever have an answer. Maybe there's no answer. Maybe the point is that there is no.
Well, so this came up as an artist. I was a collage artist for a little while. Okay. And when I had my collages and I did them to European audiences, no one said to me, why do you have that many images on your collages? They saw all the images as a way of having a discussion. When I did a couple of American shows, people would come up and go, well, where am I supposed to start in this? And what's the message? And it was kind of like, well, this is about abortion, but it's not for abortion. It's not against abortion. It's about the complications of abortion. It's about the history of women hurting themselves because there wasn't a safe place. There's why is there no birth control? I mean, it was like, I'm just bringing up all the questions because we don't have an answer. They didn't like it. They didn't want it. They wanted me to say, what's the message? And that made me realize, oh, okay, that's like you said, if there's an education system, if there's a social system that people are so fried, they want it to be easy, and just tell me that, it's like when I lived in Buffalo, the whole city's crumbling, but if the Buffalo Bills won, you could be happy. You could say, wow, yeah, we won, If we lost, okay, well, but meanwhile, you're still homeless. You don't have money to pay the rent, but Buffalo Bills won. Okay, good.
Oh, and that just repeats itself in so many different cities and towns. You know what I mean? All over, all over the Rust Belt.
Yes.
Cleveland.
Everywhere.
Like, we got big effects right here, guys. You know what I mean? We got fire bombings in 3 years. Like.
But a real quick thing on that was all these things have potential, sports, art, whatever you want. Because in the beginning, when I was growing up, Buffalo didn't have a football team. We had the Cleveland Browns. Oh, wow. And the complicated thing was the star was a black man, Jimmy Brown.
Yeah.
And that threw a real wrench with my uncles and me being a young kid cheering on a black guy. And Jimmy Brown even made statements at that time I am going to be the example of not having a white man take me down. And I'm going to carry 6 white guys across the finish line. And and historically, you sort of see these things a little bit and then realize, wow, what an effect it had on me as a kid. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to have a black man as a hero. I'm just watching this thing and this guy, I'm thinking everybody else thinking who's good in the sport and what's the sport and getting into the game. And, I want to be the guy who breaks through and runs for touchdowns. Well, no, not that guy.
Well, I really laugh because of the awkward nature. I'm sure you've experienced this. It's like when as you get older, there's things you need to discover. Like the first time you realize that your parents are just human and that they've been fucking up the entire time and that they've been making up as they go along, because really that's the point to life. We don't know, you know what I mean? And it's hard to admit, the older I get, the more things I don't know.
Right.
For every answer I get to something, 10 other questions come up, and we're just making this up as we go along. I used to tell students, adults are just children with the right to vote.
That's right.
We don't really change, we're human. But you have all these awkward moments like that, where like, well, yeah, it seems cool, but there's a few things you need to understand here, be pious. You grow up in a particular religion, and then you come to realize as you're an adult, it's not just about love. We don't love this group of people because they're going straight to hell. And if you're going to be a part of this club as an adult, you need to recognize that and you need to fall in line. And then little wonder why different churches wonder why people just left.
That's right.
You just can't figure it out. We're just an irreligious society. Well, it's not that. It's that you said that, lying is bad and you lied to us. So we decided that this institution doesn't mean anything anymore.
Well, and then you wonder how many times does an institution have to keep lying before you finally give it up, or so
before it clicks, right?
Yeah, I mean, oh, really? Did a priest abuse somebody? No.
Well, the same sort of place that somebody can come from, say, yeah, I don't agree with all that. It is bad. But, once I had kids, I want my kids to have the same experience that I had growing up in the church. Now, there's something valid to that. If you had a positive experience, like I had a positive experience as a kid, but as an adult, I came to realize I don't want my kids to be a part of it. They're going to miss something for sure. Right. But what they're also going to miss is the hypocrisy that I just, it's like joining a club. You don't join a club if you don't like the rules.
That's right.
And so, but that's the same mentality that people have when they say, I don't entirely know what the truth is, but I've arbitrarily decided I'm going to go down this path because it's easy, because I have to pick something, right? Well, maybe you don't have to pick anything.
That's right. Hey, I'm sorry. I just have to break away just for a minute here. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Ready?
Pause. Actually.
Oh, you did?
I am paused. 9 o'clock.
Oh, well.
Or 8:56.
Let me know when you're ready.
All right. We are recording again, so we're ready to get to going in 3, 2, 1.
So I thought of a story to tell you that made sense in terms of some things we were talking about as far as who do you want to do your art for. I wasn't that much into Ginsberg at a time. It's funny, if there's a bunch of poets, or maybe you've had this with book or even with certain music, you get the book and everyone said you should read this book and you tried to read it and it just didn't grab you. 3 years later, 8 years later, somehow you pick it up and you read through the whole thing in 2 days. And you wonder, what was it that I didn't get before? Because suddenly I think this is fantastic, or whatever it is. But I had a wild experience. I actually met Ginsberg a number of different times, and one of them was this wild experience. He came to a small school, a college I was at in central New York, and I think the only reason he came there is because Orlowski and some folks had a farm out there, and he was going to read and get paid and get near there. So this was a pretty conservative school. It had a lot of fraternities and sororities. He was going to be in the gym. And when he showed up, there was hundreds and hundreds of people because they just wanted to see him because he was, quote, famous. So Ginsberg came out and looked over the crowd and pulled out his squeeze box and starts screeching, really. And he just kept screeching until there was only 30 people left. And it was wild because the whole time period I was thinking, Alan, these guys are leaving. These are the guys who want us to go to Vietnam. And this is the, people say something to them so that, you can change this, I don't know, the words of wisdom, something,
Something, right.
Something, man.
something, man, and it didn't seem like he cared. He was screeching away. And we got closer. And, like I said, it got down to about 40 of us. And all of a sudden he stopped and looked around and said, okay, these are the people I want to read to.
Wow.
That's perfect.
And it was kind of as if, it was like, okay, you got, I knew those people weren't going to want to hear what I had to say anyways.
Right. They were just there to be there.
And so, and I actually thought this about, I saw the Dalai Lama twice and once for an extended period of time and one day, but both times he did something that I thought, wow, the rest of the religious guys don't do this. And it's not about, so once in Boston, he came out and he's standing there and he goes, okay, I'm going to stand here for a couple minutes so everybody can take your pictures and you can say that you were here, and then I'll wait a couple minutes and you can leave, because no fire is going to come out of my hands. I'm not going to sacrifice anything. There's not going to be any miracles. I'm going to go over and sit in that chair and I'm going to talk about the mind. And it's kind of boring. So, I don't want you to feel bad and you're going to feel like, geez, I want to leave. You can leave now. Huh. And then one time I saw him and it was like in the height of everybody was, doing the prostrations and they're all chanting and it's going wild. And all of a sudden he stops the whole thing, excuse me, and comes up to the mic and goes, I don't know if anybody's out there paying attention, but we don't really need to do all this to get to where we're going. You know what I mean? Like this isn't how you do it, but people think I should take this famous thing and run it around my head because it's 500 years old. And so I'll do the ritual, but we know this isn't it, right? And then he went back and they were, and I was like, and the time that I saw him when he did a bunch of days, he did this twice in the 12 days. The first time he did it, I thought, I just hallucinated that. He didn't do that, did he? And I was with my partner and I said, I think he just did that. And she goes, no. And then about 4 days later, he did it again. I said, see, he's doing it.
That was real.
He's actually saying it, So I think this what I think what's that?
No, it's incredible. It's incredible. When you're in a situation like that, like with somebody that famous, and that happens, you end up having to say these stuff. Did that really just happen?
Yeah. And it was really great because it was really, I mean, it goes back to some of the questions we were talking about. I think the most important, and this is just my opinion, but I think the most important part is being yourself and realizing that you want to do the work that comes through you. As a performer, I feel like I'm making an offering. It's not so much. I mean, when I was in Senegal, listening to the artists there, they really, first of all, they make all their own instruments. There aren't scales. They're not asking anybody what key they're in.
When they're doing all this like multi-rhythmic stuff, like the kids are dancing around, like they're tapping 7 in their hands on their head and stuff while they dance in 4 and stuff. And you're like, how are they this polyrhythmic? And it's they're poly what? Like this is our music.
That's right. And they do it because it helps people. They're not looking to have a hit single.
No. Well, it's the ritual of whatever you're celebrating, not celebrating. It is the rhythms of life. And I don't mean that like Disney movie rhythms of life. I mean like,
and it's a healing. It was very interesting. It just made me, realize, what is the purpose of art? And again, if you're just thinking that, oh, I'm going to be rich and I'm going to sell you plastic this or that, well, that's a different thing. I mean, you might call yourself an artist in that or not. If it's because you love an instrument and then, it goes back, I use that example, I'll just bring it back up. I thought it was really interesting when they were asking Hendrix, they were talking to people about Hendrix and his guitar, and that person said, he never took it off. He just played with it. It wasn't about notes. He heard a sound and thought, oh, and I have a feeling that's the sound I want. I just figured out how to make that sound. And it was a great interview with Stash from Guns N' Roses. I always get to say his name wrong. Slash. Sorry, I call him Stash. He had a lot of stash, I think, with him.
Yeah, I was gonna say he has some.
Yeah. Right. It's all
But
in
he
his
said an
hair.
interesting thing. They asked him about Hendrix, and he took out his guitar and he played, say Voodoo Child or something. He goes, so, that's Hendrix. I can play it. And the guy said, well, what do you mean? You're acting, what's wrong? He says, I know all the notes. I studied all the notes. So I'm playing the notes.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't play it knowing the notes. He played it with a feeling. Mine doesn't have the feeling.
Right.
Mine, he said, at some point I had to acknowledge I'm not doing the feeling. I need to play my own stuff and put my feelings into what the notes are. Or I'm not thinking about notes. I'm thinking about what the sounds are. I mean, I feel so lucky with the Do It Now because John Sheldon and all these people have been through all the various things of doing songs, writing songs, playing notes, playing covers, doing whatever it is. They don't want to be doing that in their life now. They know their instruments. They want moods. They want feelings. They want people to be experiencing that mood and feeling by what they're doing. And maybe it's only one note that they're hitting. John can, do amazing riffs. And then, no, he's only playing a few notes here and there. And sometimes when he does that, it's more powerful than the amazing riffs. But everybody wants amazing riffs sometimes. So
right.
And when someone says, how did you come to your style? Well, it was a long process, and it was along of me keep developing what I wanted to be trying to do for my art form. And right now it's manifesting itself in my solo performances and my performances in Do It Now of a different way. And people say, oh, I don't see somebody, what do you call what you do? So then that becomes, as we, bring this all the way back around, the problem, are we calling it improvisation? Are we calling it beat? We're calling it poetry. We're talking a spoken word artist. I mean, I'd say yeah to all of that. And
all of the above.
Well, exactly, right. Not to get pigeonholed or give people this immediate impression in their mind based on a word or a phrase that immediately takes them to a stereotype. Then they get disappointed when it's not any of those things when they actually see it happen.
Well, it is tricky though too for somebody who say is new and they say, here's a guitar and okay, what am I playing? And so do you teach them She's Coming Around the Mountain or some song that's a classic that everybody knows? And then do you think that that's the only thing you're playing? Or what are you trying to, you brought it up. How do you foster this? I mean, it changed in the juggling world. There was a French school that opened up that didn't teach, okay, here's how to do the cascade so you can know how to juggle. They would say, okay, you got accepted into school. Here's a studio. We'll bring food to the door. Here's one ball. We'll see you in a week.
Right.
Interesting.
Show us what you came up with by being you and the ball in the room for a week.
What?
Okay. Now here's two.
Pay for this. This would be jail. This is torture. But I paid for it. So.
Yeah, or they didn't pay. You didn't have to pay. They actually accepted you, and they wanted because they saw you had talent, and they just wanted you. And so then the stuff that came out of that school was everybody go, how did you think of that? And it was like, well, this is how they thought about it. Out of the 200 things they tried, these 5 are killer. The other 200 were just there, But they would have never
forced them into the process of like the repetition and the forming of ideas and stuff that you got to go through all that crap to get to those 5 things, right? And that's what stops people. That's the difference between the great artists and the amateurs is there's no difference other than somebody was brave enough to just, go through all of that and peel back the layers until they got to like, here it is, here's the art. I figured it out, and it's so it's fear that stops that, you know what I mean? Because people are like, I don't want to have to go through all that myself. When you're teaching music, you'll get the, I don't want to learn how to play music. Just teach me this song. Like, are you hearing yourself? Well, how are we going to do that?
Right.
Well, you can, because you say, here's the 10 things you pluck. Practice plucking those same 10 things over and over again. Okay, it's starting to sound like Twinkle Twinkle.
Right.
And you go, okay, if that was the only thing you wanted to figure out and do, okay, maybe you get inspired in that. to go, can I jazz up Twinkle Twinkle? Can I go faster? Can I do this? And I think that's what we're asking about. What makes an artist, or what makes someone, and how much we need art in science, how much we need art in business, as you said. I mean, I remember Rosenthal, one of the representatives, when they cut money from the arts because they said companies, the people didn't want to pay for it because they wanted schools to focus on reading and writing, and companies were complaining they can't sign the contracts, they can't read the contracts. So then after a couple of years of focusing on that, then all of a sudden Rosenberg comes back and says, guess what? The company is saying everybody can sign their name, but they're as boring as hell. We need somebody who can actually think now, you know? And you go,
you're referring to Stan Rosenberg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like,
so, and I remember all that.
So it was kind of like, why wasn't that obvious to begin with? I don't get it. Like, why did you have to even think? I mean,
interesting.
Well, and that's what I was saying earlier when it was in the papers and stuff, and people like, this creative class, we need people we've got Harvard Business School grads going and interviewing, and part of the interview is they've got to make things with Legos and they can't figure it out. We gotta produce MBAs that can play with Legos. I'm quoting that. That was in a newspaper.
Yeah.
And I I'm laughing at it only because, like, for those of us that live and make some kind of art every day as a conscious decision to do that as a career and as a person or whatever, it's like, you know what I mean? It's just like after a while you get to a certain point, you're just tired of all this. Like, okay,
yeah,
can't we just support this in the way it needs to be supported and just,
Well, that's a key part. I mean, how to live in this dual reality that doesn't match up. So you're not willing to pay me. You want the songs for free. And then you're realizing not everybody can come and do the songs. I mean, it was kind of funny. Sometimes I would, in the juggling or, I would get hired by some corporations to do their kind of summer picnics. After a couple of years, one place called and said, oh, wow, really? You want that much? And I was like, yeah, you remember what I did? Yeah, that's how much I get. Oh, well, our secretary has agreed to put on a wig and she's going to go out there. And we're like, great, if that's what you want to do and you want your secretary to put on a wig, I mean, go for it. If that's what first I'm kind of a little, that's too bad that's what you thought I did.
Right.
I don't even wear a wig. So that
it's not a wig, it's my real hair.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next year I would get a call and sometimes they would go, we're going to hire you back. I thought, oh, the secretary really worked out there. Huh? I mean, I guess, did they actually pull off 45-minute show? Oh, they couldn't. After they got done waving with the wig, that was the act. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, well, that's not really what a clown does. And that's not what I'm doing. And I'm not a clown. So, okay, now where do we go,
Right.
And so it's kind of a weird, I don't know why that connection isn't made to go, if you've never experimented, you're going to fear experimenting. If you've never tried things to try something new because you're going to fail and you don't want to fail, then, it's kind of, and then meanwhile, you don't want to pay the people who have to take the time, that person got paid or they had money to go to that school to be in a room to play with props until they came up with something that was very unique. And they couldn't have done that doing a job and coming home every day and trying, as we were brought up before. And so it's really, or slows it down because you can only get an hour, you only get a half hour. Oh no, you can't even get started in a half hour. You almost need to be there like 3 hours getting bored and trying everything and then being mad about it and whatever, and then going back to it. And suddenly you hit and you go, wow, what was that? Where did that come from?
Right.
And if that's seen as somehow not doing anything. I mean, I lost some early relationships because when I had a studio in my house, my partner would come in and them not being an artist and they go, oh, I guess you were just sitting here, huh? Listen, the washing machine's broken or this is happening. I was like, well, I wasn't really just sitting here. I was actually off in my mind trying to think up this bit of what I was going to say. And okay, so I go, okay, I'll just try to fix the washing machine. Oh, it's not 15 minutes. It's 2 hours later and I got the belts off and something else is wrong. And okay, well, that shot that day. I'm not writing that piece then. Right. And then trying to say, no, I'm actually going to work. Even though I'm going in this room over here, I'm actually at work. So you couldn't call me if I went to work. so you can't call me if I'm in here, I guess, or something.
Right.
And, oh no, okay, I have to have a studio somewhere else, so I go there because otherwise that doesn't, I can't do it here. And
it is remarkable how conditioned a lot of us are to, well, one, to there's certain cues that make it work or not, right? And then and there's just inertia in recognizing that for some people, and and being able to say, okay, I get that, and then living it appropriately. It's even in our language. We don't work music, we play music. We don't work poetry. We we write poetry, but it has the same level as a performance art. It has the same level of respect. These guys, these people playing on stage, they're having fun. It's theater. Right. It's like, well, no, it's really only the very end result of a lot of craft.
Right.
And a lot of pain and,
right.
Sweat equity and,
Yes. And if you don't have a culture that acknowledges that, it makes it hard for each individual. I mean, I don't remember my guidance counselor telling me that juggling was an option. I think they probably were going to tell me that I was going to be homeless. I mean, I don't know. There wasn't, after not passing the test very well and not doing too good in school.
You lost, son. Join the military. Yeah, but I don't
exactly.
want to be in
Exactly. I go to Bethlehem Steel. You live in a steel town. Just go work at Bethlehem Steel. I was like, oh, well, they're gone now. You know what I mean? And so,
right.
Well, I mean, guys, we could really keep going probably for, I don't know if there's any last questions or anything else you want to try to tie in, or there isn't a way of tying this thing.
I did want to mention, just for a moment, we'll go back to the Word Festival and stuff. So the Word Festival in the Valley, how long in total has that been going on?
10 years.
10 years. And it is, as of late, or for the entirety of the 10 years, has it always been at the Shea Theater in Turner's Falls?
I mean, a real brief, interesting thing about it, I was headhunted, actually, in a way, to move to Turner's.
Interesting.
You
were poached from another place.
Yeah, because I was, I had 7 years of being in Greenfield. Without dissing anybody, I had a really hard time not getting cultural grants. I had a hard time having the town put it on their web pages. The venues said they appreciated it, but then kept raising the prices of the venues. I kept saying,
maybe they believed in you so much.
What's that?
Maybe they believed in you so much that they thought you could raise your rates even more every year.
I'm not sure I mean, it was kind of weird because I'd go to my, at that point I was bringing in like 170 writers, and I'm going like for 4 days, I'm bringing in all these writers, and they're eating at restaurants, they're doing all this stuff. So the town this isn't costing the town anything.
No, I mean, bringing in a lot of people.
Yeah. And so and it happened actually right before, like less than 4 or 5 weeks. A couple of things happened. It happened a couple of times. Like the place that is now was the Greenfield Grill used to be. There's now a chicken place or another place.
Yeah.
4 weeks before I was supposed to have my festival there, they closed. And it just lucked out that at the time, Hawks and Reed, which was basically the arts block, was opening. And so I went over, and we don't have any acts, and we're just opening. And I pitched the festival, and they said, yeah, if you can fill the place in, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, go for it, because we don't have anything yet. And so I thought I had a home there. But then as they started to grow, it was like, well, you can't give you a weekend now, or you got to pay this much because we get this much from the bands. Wow. And somehow word went out, and and so this is tricky. This is a thing that artists should look for. So Turner's Falls and East Hampton and many other towns have hired art coordinators. The River Culture, the East Hampton Arts Company, who has a person that is looking for things to bring to the town. And if there's papers you have to fill out, like in Greenfield, they go, you have to get these permits. It's like, well, where are they? Well, you have to go to the town hall. You have to you have to It's like, well, but when River Culture called me, they were like, listen, we hear you're having a hard time with, they're raising the rates. The Shea is interested in your festival. I have this much money to help you come. Then when I got there, they were like, you're going to need these 4 4 permits, and they were like showed up and says, here's the 4 permits. I filled them out. You just need to sign it. I'm going to take it to the, because the town wants this to happen.
That's amazing.
And so when you look in the paper and you go, why is East Hampton having arts walks? Why is East Hampton having this? Why is East Hampton? Why are people thinking East Hampton is the art center? Is because that person there is making those, looking for artists. The way, same thing with the woman with the river culture. If someone has something they want to do, they go to her, and she's more of a yes than a no.
Right. Yeah.
Are you going to make,
from an economic development standpoint on this show, we talk a lot about how for cities and towns, so much of why they pass or fail in these type of things is of their own volition. It's not the externalities. It's not that Boston gets all the money and the rest of the state of Massachusetts doesn't get money. It's not that New York sucks the life out of every place else in the state. It's cities and towns, large and small, making a conscious decision to do it right or not.
or understanding what happens. Like, I need to know, oh, the river culture, they're already dealing with all the businesses. Could you ask the businesses if they want to put ads into my program book? Oh, can you ask these 4 venues, could I use them as venues? Oh, so now I'm not just asking them. The town is saying, hey, there's going to be this big event. I used to argue with Greenfield a long time ago when I was a juggler, because I would go to these, like a town like Wendell or something, but I would go to Connecticut to this farm town who suddenly decided they're going to paint pumpkins. This is before there was all the big pumpkin festivals.
Yeah.
3,000 people are driving dirt roads to get to this place because they're painting pumpkins.
Wow.
And they're hiring me and 10 other people to perform because now there's all these people there and they want to make it something. And I would come back and I'd go, wait a minute, you're on Route 2 and Route 91 and tons of people pass through, and you can't close the streets and have a festival and have people come?
Right.
I don't understand. I don't
Right.
understand what's the mystery of how this works.
I'm telling you, it is true, right? I mean, it's, cities and towns make that decision as a community. Am I going to be difficult, or am I going to, we want with said town to the west or the east, or we want that kind of stuff happening here too. Well, here's what you got to do to make that happen. What you mean? It takes money? You mean it takes time? It takes effort? Half the time it isn't even money. It just takes effort.
Or it started out with, we're going to have a pumpkin fest in Keene, and they had 20 pumpkins, and grandma and a couple of people showed up.
Right.
Oh, now there's 10,000 pumpkins and all of Keene is shut down and the roads are blocked, and okay,
right.
we got to stop it because there's too many. We got a Woodstock and pumpkins. You know what I mean? It's like, okay. And so it's like, well, yeah, you don't know, and you're trying to make it happen. I mean, so that's another thing for artists to think about. And we're looking, I mean, if you live in Massachusetts, not every state, not every city is the city you may do your art in.
Right.
You said you may want to go to Worcester because Worcester's got more clubs that are promoting jazz than somewhere else, and or doing whatever they might be doing that's not happening in Northampton. Oh no, all the venues in Northampton are only for big names. There's no more Bay States. There's no more this or that for people to just bands to go to play. Okay, well, which city has the places that are just kind of these sweaty hovels that somehow the most outrageous new bands come out of,
Right.
And so it's kind of a, you can't, there's your art and what you want to do, and then you have to search. And I think young people are doing it because the social media has a lot of that. You are searching for your crowd of who does this or does that. So I think they're ahead of the game. I kind of had to come into it because, one, there wasn't this social, I did it differently. It was by going, looking for festivals or looking. I mean, just like, it's also true. When I met jugglers, I realized, all these, just because we all juggle, we're not, some people I can't talk to. Some people aren't going to be my friends. Some people are going to be, I want to avoid them. Oh, these people I hit it off and they're lifelong friends.
Right. It's like any other community, right?
Yeah. Just because we're holding clubs or holding guitars doesn't mean we're going to, we have a new community. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. That's true. So with the zombie apocalypse upon us, and at some point in time in the next 6 to 12 months, one would assume that this will die down. So for future, I'm just interested to know, from a format standpoint, we were talking earlier about the advantages to what we're doing right now, right? Is in the future for that festival, is there like a hybrid model? You know, can you reach more people if you're melding all of the cool parts of a live festival with the digital parts as well, and then, you know, and having that create more critical mass?
Yes to all that. I mean, there's one problem. Everything I'm told is I don't see anything until 2021 fall, maybe.
Yeah.
It really depends in terms of the vaccine and how many people believe the vaccine, and we see that the vaccine actually works. Also, I don't think, unless, depending on how the economics actually does change, I mean, it's unbelievable that every country in the whole world is giving their population 2,000, 4,000 a month, knowing there's no jobs, and we can't even get 1,200 again out of the, you know, it's a whole thing right there. Or they're not even thinking they're going to do a stimulus package. I mean,
unless we give zero liability consequences for the largest corporations among us, who we know have been getting sick of work.
Yeah, and also give them more tax breaks and give them more money. You know, it's like,
Right.
okay, but we suddenly went down there. But so back to the performance things, there's a lot of factors there that I don't know. And like I said, I don't want to give up now. There's a part that of all these artists that I've met that I would want to do some kind of festival, which is only using this, because now I have our poets I can ask from Hungary. I have poets I can ask from Senegal. I have poets I can ask from Sweden. I have poets I can ask from all over the country, and have a pretty amazing thing that I think, wow, okay, I think I want to turn you folks on to these people. Yes, the real question will be, what venues exist when we come back?
Yeah, well, that's
a real big question. I think we're going to be at a time of, okay, this is what exists. Now, how do I use what exists? Because, you know, like you said, we were talking earlier, I mean, maybe there's going to be a lot more abandoned buildings. And so now the question becomes, as it was in Buffalo, people squatted, and they did in other cities, you know, abandoned buildings, and nobody cared what you did in them. And so you suddenly had wild theater and had wild other music until they found out you were doing it, and then you had to figure out something else. And so I think there's nothing like, and if as a performer, and if you've really been an audience member in something that is really electrifying or is amazing, to take away that aspect of feeling the live crowd responding to you, or you as an audience being, I mean, sometimes being in a room of all jugglers watching amazing jugglers, nobody had to put up a sign of us all screaming at the top of our lungs because we watched something that we thought was impossible, because we knew it ourselves. Other audiences may not, but that feeling of being in an audience, to have that emotion with other people, whether it is good listening to good music, or me as a performer. I mean, I only had 3 things I did live, and 2 of them were in parking lots with people sitting 6 feet apart, with me outside of a bookstore with a mic, and they were far enough away, and I had to put plastic bags on the mics so that different people could read and not pass because of what might be on the mic. But I remember on the first one reading and hearing someone laugh or hearing a reaction, and it was like, oh yeah, right, okay, yes, actually having a reaction, you know, not just seeing people waving their hands on a Zoom, you know, really.
Comes my clap emoji.
Exactly. So, you know, the question about what are we going to do? I mean, we don't know, and normal is not normal anymore, and some of us don't want to go back to normal for a lot of other things that were normal before, the racism and everything else, shooting unarmed people. I mean, so that was considered normal. So that part, but in terms of performing, I think if you're an artist, you're going to want to show your work. So you're trying to figure out how to show your work, and so maybe it happens on the screen, maybe it doesn't, but we have to really going to have to look at the landscape to see what's out there, and then we always have to be creative of figuring out what is that kind of setting then.
Right.
And I think people have, you know, are going to question, do they want to just sit anymore? Or do they want, I mean, each time, like we said, when radio happened, when TV happened, each of those things changed what went on in houses. All of a sudden people were in living rooms looking at something or not, or,
Yeah.
I think that's we're moving into a new time period now that we're going to have to say, okay, nobody knows, and let's see what it's going to be.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
it feels like we have an opportunity. If we compare this to the last pandemic, that what happens after World War I and then the pandemic and all of the social strife, a lot of the strife of the labor movement of that time. This is the end of the Gilded Age, all that kind of stuff. But what comes after that? Well, the Roaring '20s came after that. So, so it could be really cool after this. But we're going to have to do a lot of social designing, those of us on the street level, in order for it to be more fair and equitable.
That's right.
Otherwise, this is because so far over the last 9 or 10 months, I just wrote about this on our blog. So far it's entirely favored large corporate chains of whether it be food or retail, different sectors within retail and different commerce. And at the expense of all the independents.
But even they're going down, even many of them are going down.
And even many of them are going down, right? If their financial models were only to run on low margins, that only takes you so far, even with PPP. I mean, at the end of the day, if you were never making money in the first place, you were really a business that was ready to fold. And then this hit, and it doesn't matter how big you are. So, interesting times to say the least, Well, Paul, I got to tell you, it's been a real pleasure. We have 2 episodes here.
Double.
We could have probably 20 more. We could run them. We could
run them. Well, we'll have you back. We'll have you back to talk again, and we'll, we've got plenty of different things we can talk about. Our guest tonight, U.S. National Beat. I love the fact that their title is U.S. and National. Just to reemphasize it. U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate for 2019, 2020. The Pioeneer Valley's own Paul Richmond. Thank you for being on the show.
Hey, thanks guys for doing the show, and thanks for showcasing artists, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. It was awesome to hear.
I'm glad you had fun, Cam, my intrepid producer.
I always have fun.
Keep safe, guys, and keep creating.
Yeah,
ending season 1 of the Are We Here Yet podcast. It's pretty exciting. So, episode 33, you have listened to the Are We Here Yet podcast, and our last episode of 2020. Good night.
Good night.
Awesome show. Okay.